Hello, everyone.
Hello, Alicia.
Welcome to Team Book Fest.
Thank
You are in Let's Get Real. We are going to get started in just 1 minute.
Nice. Ryan, is this your first festival or?
Yes, it is.
Nice. What grade are you in?
I'm in 8th.
Oh, very cool. So are you in the Fairport School District or
I'm actually in Greece.
Oh yeah, okay.
Ooh.
In there. Nice.
Okay. How about you, Aya?
I'm a 10th grade in Rochester.
Very cool.
I is at a school called Webster, which is a pretty nice district. Your high school, as I recall, is kind of like a beautiful building. Do I have that right? Is that right, Aya? Or am I, in my aging brain, am I confusing everything?
Yeah, that's right.
Felt like I was walking into a mansion, I think, when
All right, so we're going to get started. And again, we are in the panel discussion, Let's Get Real. My name is Alicia Gunther. I am with the Monroe County Library System, and I will be the panel facilitator. If anybody who's participating has any questions, you can put them in the chat box, and we will pass them along to our 3 authors, who I'm going to let Aya, one of our teen volunteers, introduce. So Aya, it's all yours.
Thank you. Just a reminder to everyone that this meeting is being recorded, so make sure you keep your cameras and mics off. Okay, so with us today we have 3 incredibly talented authors. We have Paul Griffin, Hena Khan, and Diana Ma. Paul Griffin is an award-winning author of middle school and young adult books, including 10 Mile River, The Orange Houses, and Burning Blue. Hena Khan incorporates her culture and religion into middle grade and picture books, including Amina's Story, Under My Hijab, and Islam Curious George. Finally, Diana Ma writes middle grade and young adult books featuring Asian American heroes and believes in writing books with diversity. This is shown in her works, Iris, apparently. We hope you all enjoy getting to know these authors more.
Thanks, Aya. That was awesome.
All right, so to get started, our first question will be, Let's Get Real. What is one real world experience that has made an appearance in one of your books? And we'll start, I like alphabetical order, so we're gonna start with Diana.
Hi, that's a great question. There's actually quite a few things that have influenced Eris apparently that have happened in the world, but I'm going to talk about Hollywood. So my character is a Chinese American actress and teen actress, and she's decided that instead of going to college after high school, like her parents want her to, she's going to try to big in Hollywood. And I was inspired by this because I've been fascinated by reading about all these accounts of actors and directors and screenwriters just really confronting these stereotypes and tropes of who Asian Americans and Asians are supposed to be. And especially as a young teen, she is just trying to figure all of that stuff out herself and who she is. So being confronted with, oh, as an Asian girl, as a Chinese girl, you're supposed to be passive, yet, and her sexuality is defined in very limited ways by Hollywood. So she has to figure out how to confront that through her journey. So I was really struck by Michelle Yeoh, John Cho. I'm forgetting the names of people. The screenwriter for Crazy Rich Asians. She was a screenwriter. Adele Lim came to me, her name, and I read an article about how in the second Crazy Rich Asians, she found out that she was getting paid significantly less than the white screenwriter, and so so she gave an interview where she basically said, my experiences are not soy sauce to sprinkle on the script to add flavor. It's valid and it's real, and I deserve to get paid as much. So she walked, which I think is amazing. And so in my book, I decided to have one of the central tensions be that Gemma, my main character, is working under a white director, but they brought in a co-director who is also Chinese. And it's a story in many ways, even though it's kind of a subplot. I really felt it was important to see that mentorship between a younger Chinese American actress and an older one, and how they together work for fuller representation.
Awesome. Hena, go ahead.
Yeah, so, well, my newest book is Amina's Song, which is a sequel to Amina's Voice. And I drew heavily from real life and my own experiences in both of these books. Amina, much like me, is a child of immigrants. She's a Pakistani American Muslim, but she's growing up in today's Milwaukee. Unlike me, the huge fictional aspect of this is that she's very, very musically talented and has a beautiful singing voice. But many of the things that she's struggling with or confronting or just living through are things that happened to me, including the central premise of this book, which is her changing friendships, and one of her best friends, Soo Jin, starting to act differently now that they're in middle school and becoming friends with someone they weren't friends with before. And also her uncle, who comes to visit her family from Pakistan, and his attitudes and worldview being very different than her own and her family's. In Amina's Song, she gets to visit Pakistan, and the story actually begins with her there. And that was very much drawn from my real life experience as well, where I visited Pakistan around the same age, and I was so moved, and I felt transformed by that experience, because I, was connecting with the country of my heritage and with relatives who I hadn't seen in many years. And I just fell in love with it. And when I came home, I felt like I was, somebody new. And yet my friends and everyone around me, saw me the same. And they were interested up to a point, so Amina's eager to share this love and passion she has for this new place and to share that part of her identity, but she feels like she has a limited audience, and she's also dealing with other people's perceptions, which are often preformed and not what reflects reality.
Wow, that's awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Paul.
Well, I'm gonna pick up on Hena's character, Amina, being musically talented. As I was finishing this book, Saving Marty, there's a young woman in the book who's really musically talented, and she wasn't in the book when I started writing it, but I was in the process of adopting my daughter, and the way I came across my daughter was my wife and I were looking to adopt an older kid. And there was a program in Colombia, in Bogota, where the way you get to meet the kids at first is it kind of looks like what we're looking at right now, with a bunch of video screens, but they're all pre-recorded videos. And each video that you would click, this poor kid, the older kids that have a harder time getting adopted, they would say, please, I just want to have a family. I love soccer. I want somebody to play football with. I would love a brother to play football with. And, the next kid would say, I wish somebody could teach me how to cook. I would love to sit around a dinner table with a family. And the stories were just so sad. It was all like, please save me because I'm going to turn 16 and I'm going to age out of the adoption system. And the story started to get mixed up until I clicked. Uh, the young woman who was to become my daughter, she said, look, I'm going to sing for you. And she had the most amazing voice. And she used to sing in front of the supermarket. She was homeless. She and her mom was an addict. And to get pizza money, you know, they would, my daughter would put out a little hat in front of the, you know, at her feet and sing. So that, that character was not originally in the book, but as I was finishing up, you know, I was trying to meet my deadline on this book, and with the other time I was just filling out paperwork for this adoption stuff. It was like, you know, hours a day of paperwork. So I was going back and forth, and the adoption paperwork started to make its way into the book. So these folks from our lives tend to leak into our pages, I think, into our hearts too.
That's an amazing story and such a great addition to the book, and that you maybe didn't even plan for. It just happened.
So like a clown car, you know, you don't know what's going to happen next, you know.
Absolutely. And just for those people, for anybody who joined us a little bit later and may have missed, if you have any questions for our panelists, please enter it into the chat, and we will hopefully get to it in our time here together. All right, our next question. This may piggyback off of a lot of the from the first question, is what experience is influenced your writing the most? The ones that you had when you were a teen, or any experiences in the last few years, or maybe it's a mix. And again, we'll start with Hena. Or I'm sorry, we'll start with Diana. I was going in alphabetical order.
Okay. I'm actually glad you asked that question, because when you asked the first one, I realized after listening to Hena and Paul that I wasn't talking about how my own life influenced the book, but just what I had read and what was out there in the world. So I'm really glad that you asked a question to bring it back, because when I started writing, and I should actually grab the book. When I first started writing Eris Apparently, which is my debut book, I thought I was going to be writing a book completely different from my own life, because I am definitely not an actress. I have no acting experience whatsoever. And she's going to live this glamorous life, and the title is Eris Apparently, so you can sort of get an idea of there's money and wealth involved, and she is, and this is also the first in a series called Daughters of the Dynasty, which follows the descendants of, the fictional descendants of Chinese Empress Wu Zetian. So I thought this is going to be completely separate from my own life. But when I started writing it, it's also about a teenager who goes to China under very mysterious circumstances for the first time as a teen, and she's never been to China before. And that also was my own experience. I was a teenager when I first went to China, and I had this expectation that as soon as I touched down in Beijing, I was going to be enveloped in my homeland. This was going to be my place. I was going to instantly feel that sense of belonging. And it's just not that easy because I was born in the US, I grew up all my life here, and there were definite cultural differences that even though I grew up in a Chinese American household, the daughter of immigrants, it was very different. And in fact, because of the very complicated politics in diaspora, although my parents were born in China, they spent a bulk of their lives actually in Taiwan. So it was a very complicated homecoming, and Gemma's homecoming is complicated by other things, big secrets that mine wasn't, but it was still that search for connection, that search for belonging, that straddling of two worlds of her questioning well, am I American? Am I Chinese? What is this? Why can't I find a place, a belonging in either place? So it's kind of that, and my story didn't wrap up as neatly as a fictionalized form, but I wanted to give her that sense of belonging so badly that I realized I was trying to write the story I wanted. So I really borrowed a lot more than I thought, to the extent that when I finished it, I realized, oh, my parents are going to read this. My family is going to read this. And I put a lot more of them in than I had thought I would. And when my mother read it, she did love it, so it's okay. But she said she was talking about it as if this was my story. And she was like, oh, at the end, when you stood up for yourself, I was so proud of you. And I was like, no, that wasn't me, Mom. That was Gemma. And she's like, whatever. So in her head, I think it's my story.
I love that. I love that so much. And I think I can relate to so much of what you're saying. And I think for me too, that idea of wanting your characters to maybe, it's almost like you wanting more for your children than you had. So I feel like for my characters, they struggle with, certain things I struggled with, but I think I do make it easier for them in a way, or give them the outcome that I wish I had as well. I love the way you frame that. I think for me too, my experience going to Pakistan was very similar to what you described, where, and Amina feels the same thing, where you expect it to be this instant connection. Everyone around looks like you, you're related to some of these people. And yet when you realize how different you do feel, like maybe not speaking the language fluently, or in Amina's case, the book opens with her in a crowded market, trying to shop with her cousin, and she's being told to keep her mouth shut and not speak, because if they hear her American accent, they're going to triple the prices. And so she's trying to bargain and wants to be a part of it, and wants to. And then at the same time, she said, everyone's telling me to speak Urdu, but then when I do, they laugh, or they correct me, or they speak for me. And so that push and pull. But for me, so much of, I would say the biggest experience for me that affects my writing, and a lot my middle grade writing especially, is growing up bicultural, trying to find my place, and for me not having role models, not having characters in books to look up to, not having any positive media representation. I think that makes me want to write the books I do, so that kids like mine, kids like little me, have the stories that I didn't have, and can feel seen and feel included, and have characters that they feel are like them.
I guess, well, one experience for me was when I finished college, I was running on fumes financially. I came back to New York City with a duffel bag, and we didn't even have laptops or anything like that back then, just some notebooks. And I was crashing on people's couches until, that gets old for the people you're staying with. And one day I was working pickup construction on West 44th Street in Manhattan. And this guy, 44th Street was kind of a rough block back then. And this guy is looking at me from across the street. And I'm thinking, this guy's staring at me for a long time. He walks across the street and he says, hey, I got a job for you. And I'm thinking, I bet you do. It was the block back then. There was a lot of activity with prostitution and drugs. And he said, no, I bought that building for $1 from the city. It was an old brownstone building. It was just a shell of a building. He said, I have a bunch of garbage in there. I gotta get out onto the street. So I said, what are you paying? He said, $20, and that's all he had to say. And I started working for this guy. And when it would come time to go, he would, the first night, he said, where are you living? And I said, I'm here and there. I'm staying with friends. And he said, well, it'd be nice to have somebody to keep an eye on the place. You want to stay here? And I said, where? It's a building show. And he said, well, you're a smart guy. You know, you can kind of figure out make a little corner for yourself. So I figured it was free rent. And I flipped over some milk crates, and anybody listening, don't ever do this. I had found a mattress on the street. You know, I got lucky with no bed bugs on that one, but I had lived like that for 6 months. You know, no water, or no hot water anyway. I tapped a cold water pipe. You know, no bathroom, and living like that, and just saving enough money to try to get up enough money to rent an apartment. Years later, I saw these two kids at a park, and the one kid he was fixing a phone. You know, he had ripped the back off the phone, and he was poking at it. And I had just walking around with my dog, and I sat down on this bench pretty far down from him, and I said, "Hey, what are you doing with that phone?" He says, "I'm disabling the GPS." And he says to me, "Are you aware that your dog exhibits exotropia?" And I said, "No, I don't even know what that is." He said, "Yeah, his eyes look out to the sides." And I thought, wow, this kid is really on point. You know, he's really aware of his surroundings. I wasn't aware that he was watching me, but he was so attentive to detail that he saw me coming in from the side, and you know, threat assessment, right? So I looked at his shoes, and his shoes were all worn out. And this park, which was called 10 Mile River Park, there was a homeless encampment. This is back in like 2003, 2004, along the railroad tracks. And this idea came to me. You know, I remembered what it was like when you didn't have a place that you felt safe in. You were really on point and really aware of everything that was going on in your environment. And I ran home, and I started writing about this kid. And there was another kid at the park. You know, he was doing tricks on his bike, and all these people were watching him, and he was basking in the sun, and he had this like beautiful hair. You know, just like he was golden, and this poor other kid was kind of by himself. And I just got this idea: what if these two kids were living together, homeless? They were all that they had. And I wrote it in 3 days, and I thought, wow, that is the worst piece of junk I've ever written, and was using it for scrap paper. And then a few years later, my friend knew somebody who was becoming an agent, and I pitched her every book I'd written, 23 novels at that point. And she said, yeah, I don't think he's going to like any of those. And I had one thing left, this thing called 10 Mile River that I'd written in 3 days, and I had nothing to lose. And I told her about it, and she said, let me give that to him. And a year later, he sold it. So, you know, I think these things that we do, you know, that while we're doing them, sometimes they don't feel exactly like they're leading us anywhere. We just feel like we're trying to get by. And they often are the most impactful things that happen to us. So anybody who's having a rough time out there, it is going to make you strong. And I'm thinking you're going to be able to use that down the line with whatever you end up doing.
Thank you. Those are some amazing experiences. And we actually have a question that piggybacks right off of that from our audience. Is it difficult for you to open up and expose your lives in fiction, or is it more invigorating and relieving when you're able to take these experiences and turn them into a book for young readers?
I would definitely say both. But before that, I just wanted to say, Hena, I had the exact same experience when I was in China, where my relatives were like, don't speak. They will be able to tell from your accent immediately. There were even 2 separate lines for the entry. And if they could tell that you were a foreigner, American usually, they would put you in the line where you would pay more. And if you were a local, there was a local rate, and they would, so I wasn't allowed to speak, and I was not allowed to bargain, definitely, because they would, as you said, triple the price. So, so I didn't say anything, but know what it was, but they could just tell from the way I was dressed that I was American, and just before I even opened my mouth. So, and I remember at one point someone said to my aunt in Chinese, because I don't think she thought I could understand, why are you helping this American? You know, they're just coming in and they're ruining everything. Why are you even helping her? And my aunt was like, that's my niece. But it was just this feeling of just being a foreigner in a country that I thought I was coming home to was really profound. I'm trying to remember your question. Is it nerve-wracking or invigorating putting my life in the book, just to kind of sum up? And it is both. I mean, I told the story of nervous about what my parents would think, and actually, so my mother's reaction was that she saw me in the story and our family in the story. My father also said, I love this novel, this is great. And then, being my father, he gave me advice, because that is what he does. I definitely put his advice giving in the book. I don't know if you recognize that or not, but he had numbered his advice. And his first piece of advice was that, and this was, he had framed this as, if you want to be a best-selling novelist, this is what you need to do. He's never written a book in his life. He doesn't really read for fun. But he had opinions, and his first piece of advice was, watch your language. Watch inappropriate language. And he said, and he did have some experience. He was a middle grade math teacher for many years. And he said, our librarian would not buy books with inappropriate language. So that is something you need to watch. And I thought the language was quite mild, and it's young adult as well, so there's more leeway. But I was like, okay, that's his first piece of advice. His second piece of advice was not to use, this was really surprising to me, not to use too many Chinese words, because he thought the reader might get confused. And I thought, that is so interesting. And I just think about these lessons of assimilation that immigrants learn, to the point where using your own language in a book, for his focus was, what is the audience? What is the audience? And I thought, but I'm not writing to an audience who doesn't want to read Chinese words, who doesn't want to have that experience of, oh, this is someone else's culture, or this is my culture. I'm looking for myself in this book, or I'm looking to learn from this book. But I'm not writing for the audience that says, if this is so different, then I don't want anything to do with it. But my father's focus was, how is this book going to appeal to everyone? So it become best-selling, of course. And I thought, that's not my intent for this. So I was thinking about, the question was, how do you put yourself out there, and how does it feel? And I realized, I'm not putting myself out there to write the book that everyone wants to read. I'm putting myself out there, as Hena said, these were the books I did not have growing up. I wanted to read, I wanted to see myself, someone like me, in a rom-com. And I never saw that growing up. So that's the book I wanted to write and read. And then the third piece of advice he gave me, which is hilarious, is don't be too political. And my 11-year-old, I told him what his gong gong said, and my 11-year-old said, well, that's not going to happen. So at least he knows me. And then it's also invigorating in that I'm sorry, I feel like I'm copying so much of what Hena said, but just that knowledge that I occasionally get emails from other Chinese American from Chinese American teens who write and say, "Oh, I saw so much of my own life in Gemma. I love this book." And my 11-year-old, again, even though YA rom-coms really isn't his thing, he totally read Eris apparently in 2 days, and he loved it, and it was, and I just and it's amazing to feel that people are reading parts of my life and finding their own sense of belonging through that.
Oh, I love that. And I love that we have so much in common. And that's what I think is amazing, because I think the immigrant experience is so similar, or, you know, just being connected. And, you know, I love that our books are, I'm sure when I read your book, I'm going to adore it and feel such a strong connection too. And I can't wait. For me, I think it's both, as you said. But I find that I too had a moment where I was writing my mother into my books, and I didn't ask her beforehand. And this was actually for a series. I have a series called Zaid Salim Chasing the Dream, and it's early middle grade. And the grandmother character, so Zaid is a lot like my children. And so he's a 3rd generation Pakistani American, and his parents are a lot like my husband and me. And the grandparents are like my parents. And the grandmother is so much like my mother, and she's just very untraditional when it comes to what you imagine a grandmother to be like. You know, she likes to curse in Urdu, and she gambles, and she, you know, is really blunt and, and speaks her mind. And so I wrote a character who anyone who knows my mother knows is her. And I did it, and then I realized only afterwards that I never asked her if this is okay. You know, what if she's offended by my portrayal? And luckily she read it and found it funny. But I'm writing a companion series right now. So it was just the characterizations, really. The stories were all fiction. But I'm writing a companion series right now that actually is centered around Zaid's sister, Zara. And in that, it's drawing a lot from my experiences as a kid growing up in our neighborhood. And a lot of neighborhood antics. And one of the things that she's encountering in the new book I'm writing is about the idea of saving everything that's meaningful. And my parents, I wouldn't call my mom a hoarder, but she likes to save everything, and it becomes problematic at times. And so the book is sort of in a funny way dealing with that challenge and that process of deciding what to keep and what to part with. And when I was writing those scenes, I mean, it was so cathartic, because it took me back, and I could write these scenes where grandma's fighting with mom and saying, "That's not junk, that's my stuff. And, you know, you can't tell me what to keep." And then mom's like, you know, "We need to go to Goodwill." And so it was like, I was like, ha ha, as I'm writing it, you know, I had never felt that before, where it was like actual catharsis to write these experiences. But I definitely think it's both. And, you know, I try to be kind and tread carefully when it's very personal, of course. But I do think it's a mix of both. And like what we talked about before, getting to write what you wish might have happened, or, you know, because they do end up going to Goodwill in the end, which might not have happened in real life. And so that, you know, it's a fun way to play with the things that have actually happened to you.
I think I probably bought some of Hena's mom's stuff from Goodwill. I'm pretty sure I shop there all the time. I think if you thought about the fact that somebody was actually going to read this stuff that you were writing, you probably wouldn't write it. That, you know, that first draft, there is no one's watching, right? You're kind of in this vacuum, and you can do whatever you want. These people are, you know, they're talking. They become real, right? They're people from your life, and they start talking inside your head, and you follow them around, and they do some crazy stuff sometimes. So but I think that's really important, to just kind of let yourself go when you have the chance to be working on the story alone. And then there are these angels who come in, and these people are called editors. And my editors, I have been so lucky. Kate Harrison and Nancy Mercado and Jodie Corbett, like, these folks, they know, like, you sure you want to write that? You really want people to know that? I mean, we're pretty sure that's you talking there. So they have a good sense of, hey, you know what? This is your audience. And this is what you've brought to the story so far. And now, it's about collaboration, right? It's about creating a story that is going to be for the reader. So I think that balancing act is, I put that on my editor. My editors they know that I just say yes to the notes, and I have deep trust in these folks, and I work with them again and again. So it's a friendship, and the more you work together, the more you get to know one another, and I think that relationship is critical in knowing which of your experiences are going to be, or have a better shot at being meaningful to a reader, and what experiences the reader might find extraneous to the story.
Awesome. We have time for one more question, or I'll kind of give you an option. We have time for one more question, or maybe your final thoughts. Do you find it more interesting to write fiction that parallels your real life, or take events and that you've experienced and completely change them to fit your story? Do you find that happening more, one or the other? Or if you'd like to expand on a thought from one of our earlier questions, or share something with our attendees, I'm gonna leave the floor to you for our last few minutes.
Well, as I said before, even when I think I'm going to completely fictionalize, I'm always realizing that my own life is going to make its way into the stories I write. And partly it's because I write own voices stories, and that my characters are Chinese. And so that is very much a part of what I write and very important to me. But I started writing, I didn't actually realize I was going to be writing contemporary. I started writing speculative. So that was my thing, science fiction, dystopian, fantasy. And even when I was writing those, I was amazed by how much of my real life came into the stories. So that was just a short answer to your question, because I want to spend the rest of the time saying what a delight it has been to talk to Hena and Paul and to hear your stories. And as I said, this is all new to me. Eris Apparently is my debut book, and it's been a strange year to debut in. And one of the things that has made it lovely is to meet so many people through these kinds of book panels. So I want to thank you, Hena and Paul, and thank you, Alicia, for your facilitating, and all of you out there for watching. This has been great.
Well, thank you. And hopefully there'll be many more festivals and events to meet in person at and have a cup of coffee and chat about books, but congratulations to you. I would say that for me, I think the stories that we live, people always say, write what you know. So I do think that's a logical launch point. But I remember at one point when I was conceiving of Amina and the story, and even though it's highly fictionalized, there's pieces of my life. And I remember talking to my husband, who's not a writer, and he said, well, is that creative? Because you're just sort of taking things that happened, or like, I don't remember how he phrased it, but I mean, he didn't mean to be insulting, but he was sort of just like, how is that creative? And I was like, I don't know, I'm not creative. But I feel like sometimes I had that doubt that, in order to be a real writer, like I had to create, build worlds or write fantasy, or and I realized that, the books that I connected with so much as a child, even though I do love fantasy as well, and I write some other types of books that are very different. I loved realistic fiction. I really love stories about friendship and families and neighborhoods and kids, you know, doing stuff together. And so I think it's natural that those are the stories that I gravitate towards. So for all you writers out there, you know, just don't feel pressure to, you know, dream up. I talk to kids all the time who say, you know, I don't have ideas, or I'm not creative. And I just don't think that's true. I think all of us have ideas. And if you don't think that way, we all think differently. And I think for me, as much as I love reading fantasy, for me to create an entire world would be, you know, a big undertaking. And I think, you know, I could do it probably if I set my mind to it, but I think I want to write the stories I'm writing. And I think just finding the type of story that lives in you that you feel like sharing is a process. And but don't underestimate yourself, and don't think that, you know, what has happened to you even yesterday, you know, isn't enough to make a great story out of.
Yeah, and I think that's so critical, right? Like for the young folks who are, you know, they don't think they have a story to tell, but that's really the best story, right? Is your story. Sometimes you just need somebody to, you know, to talk it out with. And Diana, just thank you so much for, you know, being so, you use such a lovely energy, and I think you're gonna have a really good time, you know, getting around and getting to meet more people, you know, on in the young adult and middle grade publishing. People are just so awesome. Like you meet just really cool folks, and you know, you hear about a book, and you say, you know, I really would love to read it. Do you have a galley? You know, and you know they do, because they just used it and they read from it, and you're looking at it, you know, do you have a galley? And they give it to you because they have to, right? So like, I remember I was doing a panel, and Tracy Baptiste was on it, and she was talking about her book. She has this series, The Jumbies, right? And it just sounded like really so fun. And that was one where I stole a galley. And I think in like the reading, you know, in my reading life, I really love that fantasy, to be able to just get away a little bit from the realistic fiction, because that's I find that when I write, I tend to just lean into that, and it's hard for me to build worlds and to do things, you know, to create these fantastic situations. I wish I had that talent, but I'm looking at the time, and I hate to be the one who you know, had the last word on this. So hopefully Alicia will jump in. But and it was so lovely getting to hang with you too. I would love to meet you all in, you know, person.
Likewise, hopefully we will.
Yeah, I can't wait until we can all get back together. We can do this in person. We can all run around. I know Paul's done this a couple of years, and it's always fun just running around from room to room. But thank you so much for such an engaging discussion on Let's Talk Real, and how we incorporate, how you incorporate your real life experiences into your works. To our attendees, there is a ton more going on today in our Teen Book Fest virtually, and you can stop into our other panel discussions that are happening throughout the day with not only these 3 authors, but many others as well. And we hope we'll see you at some of the other discussions on a wide variety of topics. And thank you so much again. We cannot wait to hopefully be able to do this again in person. And thank you so much for making all those connections, and for all of the work you do, and the amazing stories that you share with our young readers. If anybody is interested in obtaining some of the works by these 3 authors, you can check out their pages to buy their books, or you can always check them out at your library as well. All right. Have a wonderful afternoon, everybody. And again, thank you so much for such an engaging discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye for that intro.